The dirt road seemed to stretch endlessly across the Montana Territory of 1876, as Hannah Bailey trudged forward with each laborious step, one hand supporting her swollen belly while the other clutched a worn leather satchel containing everything she owned in this world. The early autumn wind whipped her auburn hair from beneath her bonnet, carrying with it the scent of pine and promise that had drawn so many westward. But for Hannah, that promise had withered like crops in drought, leaving only the heavy weight of twin babes in her womb and an even heavier heart in her chest. Just a bit further, she whispered to herself, though she had no destination in mind. The small mining town of Silver Creek lay somewhere behind her, along with the grave of her husband Thomas, dead 3 months now from a mining accident that had taken him and 5 others when a shaft collapsed. With the babies due in less than 2 months and the boarding house owner demanding payment she couldn't provide, Hannah had made the desperate choice to leave before they threw her out. The distant rumble of hooves broke through her thoughts. Hannah tensed, stepping to the side of the road. Lone women weren't safe in these parts, especially not one in her condition. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against the small derringer Thomas had insisted she carry. The rider appeared over the ridge, tall in the saddle atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. As he drew closer, Hannah could make out a broad-shouldered silhouette, the distinctive shape of a Stetson hat, and the glint of sun on what might have been a sheriff's badge. "Madam," the rider called, slowing his horse. "Begging your pardon, but are you headed somewhere particular?" Hannah squared her shoulders, trying to appear stronger than she felt. "Just making my way," she replied, voice steadier than her legs. The man dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. Now that he was closer, Hannah could see he was indeed wearing a badge of Deputy U.S. Marshal star. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His light brown hair curled slightly at the edges of his hat, and a respectful distance separated them as he removed it. "Deputy Marshal Wade Callahan, madam," he said, his voice a deep baritone that somehow put her at ease rather than alarming her further. "I don't mean to pry, but it's 15 miles to the next town and in your condition." His eyes flickered briefly to her swollen middle before returning respectfully to her face. Hannah's feet ached in protest at the thought of 15 more miles. Still, pride kept her chin high. "I appreciate your concern, Deputy, but I'll manage." The marshal studied her face, then glanced at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming in from the west. Be here within the hour, I reckon." He gestured to the horizon where slate-gray clouds were indeed gathering. "My sister's homestead is just 3 miles east. She'd welcome the company." A sharp pain lanced through Hannah's lower back, making her wince. She'd been having these pains intermittently throughout the day, but this one was stronger, the marshal noticed immediately. "Madam, you're not well." "I'm fine," Hannah insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Deputy Callahan stepped closer, his expression earnest. "My mother brought 9 children into this world. I recognize the look of a woman carrying more than one babe." His voice softened. "You're carrying twins, and by the look of it, a heavy heart too. Please let me carry all of it, at least until we reach shelter." The simple kindness in his words broke something loose inside Hannah. After months of stoic endurance, tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She swayed slightly, exhaustion washing over her. In one swift motion, the marshal was beside her, strong hands steadying her. "Easy now," he murmured. "I don't need charity," Hannah managed between quiet sobs. "It's not charity to help a fellow traveler," he replied. "It's what decent folks do." Another contraction seized her, stronger this time. Hannah gasped, clutching her belly. "That settles it," the marshal said firmly. With surprising gentleness, he lifted Hannah into his arms and carried her to his horse. "I'm taking you to my sister's place. She was a nurse during the war." Too exhausted to protest further, Hannah found herself settled in front of Wade on his horse, his arm secure around her waist as they rode eastward. "My name is Hannah," she said after several minutes of silence. "Hannah Bailey. Pleased to meet you properly, Mrs. Bailey, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Miss," she corrected softly. "My husband passed 3 months ago." The arm around her waist tightened slightly in a gesture of sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss." They rode in silence after that, the rhythmic movement of the horse strangely soothing as they made their way toward safety. Hannah found herself leaning back against the marshal's chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. For the first time in months, the weight she carried seemed a little lighter. Wade Callahan's sister lived in a tidy two-story farmhouse surrounded by fields of wheat ripening to gold in the late summer sun. A weathered barn stood nearby, and chickens scratched in the yard as they approached. Before they'd even reached the gate, a tall woman with the same sky-blue eyes as the marshal emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. "Wade," she called, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Her gaze fell on Hannah, and without hesitation, she hurried forward. "Bring her inside, quickly." "This is Hannah Bailey," Wade explained as he carefully dismounted, then lifted Hannah down. "She's with child twins, I believe, and traveling alone. Hannah, this is my sister, Abigail Cooper." "Twins, indeed," Abigail said, placing a gentle hand on Hannah's belly. "And if I'm not mistaken, they're eager to make their appearance. Come inside, dear." Another contraction gripped Hannah, confirming Abigail's assessment. Wade swept Hannah into his arms once more and carried her into the house, following his sister's directions to a downstairs bedroom. "I'll tend to your horse, then fetch Dr. Winters," Wade said after setting Hannah carefully on the bed. "The doctor's away in Butte this week," Abigail replied, already helping Hannah remove her dusty boots. "But I've delivered plenty of babies in my time. We'll manage." Wade hesitated at the door, his concern evident. "You're sure?" "Quite sure," Abigail assured him. "Now make yourself useful. Boil water, bring clean linens from the chest in my room, and there's a bottle of whiskey in the cupboard, bring that too." Hours later, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the plains, Hannah lay propped against pillows, a tiny infant cradled in each arm. Despite the exhaustion etched on her face, she glowed with a mother's pride as she gazed down at her son and daughter. "They're perfect," Abigail said, tucking a blanket around the babies. "Strong, healthy twins, just as we thought. You did wonderfully, Hannah." A soft knock at the door preceded Wade's entrance. He'd spent the night pacing the kitchen floor, jumping at every cry that echoed through the house. Now he stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in hands, his eyes wide with wonder as he beheld the new mother and her children. "Would you like to meet them?" Hannah asked softly. Wade approached slowly, almost reverently. "They're so small," he whispered. "This is my daughter, Elizabeth," Hannah said, nodding to the bundle on her right. "And my son, James. James and Elizabeth Bailey," Wade repeated, gently touching a finger to James's tiny fist. The baby's fingers curled around it instinctively, and something shifted in the marshal's expression. "Strong grip for such a little fellow. Would you like to hold one?" Hannah offered. The look of panic that crossed Wade's face made both women laugh. "I wouldn't know how," he admitted. "Nonsense," Abigail said, lifting Elizabeth from her mother's arms. "Sit in that chair and I'll show you." With the care of a man handling nitroglycerine, Wade seated himself and accepted the tiny bundle. Elizabeth squirmed once, then settled against his broad chest. The tenderness that washed over the marshal's weathered features as he gazed down at the infant brought tears to Hannah's eyes. "I'll leave you three to get acquainted while I prepare some breakfast," Abigail said, tactfully withdrawing from the room. For a long moment, neither Hannah nor Wade spoke. The comfortable silence was broken only by the soft sounds of the babies and the diminishing patter of rain on the roof. "Thank you," Hannah finally said. "If you hadn't come along when you did." Wade shook his head. "Providence put me on that road, Mrs. Bailey. I'm just grateful I was there. Please call me Hannah," she insisted. "After carrying my children into the world, I think we can dispense with formalities." A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Hannah, then. I don't know how I'll ever repay you and your sister for your kindness." Wade's expression grew serious. "There's no debt between us." "But I am curious, where were you headed when I found you?" Hannah sighed, the weight of her uncertain future settling back onto her shoulders. "Nowhere in particular, just away. The mining company gave me a pittance after Thomas died, and it ran out. I had to leave Silver Creek." "And your family?" "Is there no one who could help? My parents died of influenza when I was 16. I have an aunt in Boston, but we haven't spoken in years." Hannah looked down at James, sleeping peacefully in her arms. I thought perhaps I might find work as a seamstress or cook somewhere. I'm good with a needle and in the kitchen. Wade considered this, absently stroking Elizabeth's downy head with his thumb. Abigail could use help around the farm. Her husband died at Gettysburg, and she's managed alone since then. The work wouldn't be too strenuous once you've recovered, and there'd be a roof over your heads. Hope fluttered in Hannah's chest, but she tamped it down. I couldn't impose, it wouldn't be an imposition, Wade interrupted gently. The farmhouse is too big for one person, and my sister's been lonely these past years. She'd welcome the company, especially of little ones. He smiled down at Elizabeth. But that's a discussion for another day. For now, you need rest. As if summoned by their conversation, Abigail returned with a tray bearing tea, toast, and a bowl of porridge. Wade Callahan, are you tiring my patient with talk of the future when she should be recovering? Wade looked appropriately chastised. Just making sure she knows she has options, Abby. And I appreciate it, Hannah said, accepting the tea Abigail offered. Both of you have shown me more kindness in one night than I've known in months. Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you need, Abigail declared, taking Elizabeth from her brother. Now, Wade, out with you so Hannah can eat and rest. Those little ones will be demanding attention again before she knows it. Wade stood reluctantly. I need to report to the marshal's office in Helena, but I'll be back in a few days to check on you. His eyes met Hannah's, and the warmth in them caused a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion or motherhood. Rest well, Hannah. After he'd gone, Abigail settled into the chair beside the bed. My brother is a good man, she said simply. The best I know. I believe it, Hannah replied, watching the doorway where Wade had disappeared. I truly do. The days that followed took on a rhythm of their own. Hannah recovered her strength gradually, aided by Abigail's nurturing care and wholesome cooking. The twins proved to be good-natured babies, crying only when hungry or wet, and sleeping peacefully between feedings. Elizabeth had wisps of auburn hair like her mother, while James bore a striking resemblance to his late father with dark curls and a serious expression. Abigail's farmhouse, which had seemed so spacious at first, grew smaller as Hannah discovered the woman's extensive collection of books, dried herbs hanging from kitchen rafters, and the various projects she kept in every corner. A talented weaver, Abigail sold her textiles to merchants in Helena and the surrounding towns, creating a modest but steady income that supplemented what the farm provided. I never had children of my own, Abigail confided one evening as they sat by the fire, the twins asleep in a cradle Wade had brought on his last visit. Henry and I wanted them, but then the war came. She smiled wistfully. Having you and the little ones here brings life back to this old house. We can't stay forever, Hannah said, though the thought of leaving the safety and warmth of the farmhouse filled her with dread. Once I'm fully recovered, I need to find work, a place of our own. Abigail set aside her knitting. I've been meaning to speak with you about that. This farm is too much for me to manage alone. I've been hiring help for the heavy work, but what I really need is a partner. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. Stay, Hannah, make this your home. We'll run the farm together, you, me, and the children. There's more than enough room, and in time, you could inherit it all. Tears sprang to Hannah's eyes. Abigail, I don't know what to say. You barely know me. I know you're strong, resourceful, and kind. I know you love your children fiercely and aren't afraid of hard work. Abigail reached out to squeeze Hannah's hand. And I know my brother rides out here twice as often as his duties require, just to see the three of you. A blush heated Hannah's cheeks. Wade's visits had indeed become frequent, and Hannah found herself watching the road on days he might arrive, her heart quickening at the sight of his tall figure on horseback. He always brought small gifts a rattle for the babies, fresh fruit from town, once even a length of pretty blue fabric that matched Hannah's eyes. Wade is kind, Hannah managed. Abigail's knowing smile suggested she saw far more than Hannah admitted. Consider my offer. There's no rush to decide. But before Hannah could properly consider Abigail's generous proposal, a complication arose. 4 weeks after the twins' birth, as autumn's chill settled firmly across the land, a sleek black carriage pulled by matching gray horses arrived at the farm. A well-dressed man in his 50s stepped down, followed by a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to him. Hannah watched from the window as Abigail went out to greet them. The older man removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked dark hair, and spoke with an air of authority that was visible even from a distance. When Abigail pointed toward the house, Hannah's stomach clenched with foreboding. The knock at the door came moments later. Abigail entered first, her expression troubled. "Hannah, this is Mr. Edward Bailey and his son, Richard. They're looking for you." Hannah clutched James closer to her chest while Elizabeth slept peacefully in her cradle. "Thomas's father and brother," she said quietly. She had met them only once, at her wedding 3 years earlier. Thomas had been estranged from his wealthy Boston family after choosing to seek his fortune in the West rather than join the family shipping business. Edward Bailey stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the infant in Hannah's arms. "So it's true, Thomas's children?" "Yes," Hannah replied, lifting her chin. "Your grandchildren, Elizabeth and James." Something softened in the older man's stern countenance. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward James. Reluctantly, Hannah allowed him to take the baby. Edward Bailey held his grandson with surprising tenderness, studying the child's features with intensity. "He has the Bailey nose," he finally said, a catch in his voice. "And Elizabeth, named for my late wife, I presume?" Hannah nodded. Thomas spoke fondly of his mother. Richard Bailey moved closer, peering at his nephew with undisguised curiosity. "They're so small. They arrived early," Hannah explained, "but they're thriving now." Edward handed James back to Hannah, then straightened his shoulders. "When we received word of Thomas's death, I sent representatives to Silver Creek to make arrangements for his widow and any children. You had already left. It took considerable effort to track you here." "The mining company's compensation was insufficient," Hannah said defensively. "I had to leave." "You should have written to us," Edward replied, a hint of accusation in his tone. "Whatever differences existed between Thomas and me, you are still family. His children are my grandchildren, the Bailey heirs." The way he said heirs sent a chill through Hannah. "What exactly do you want, Mr. Bailey?" Edward exchanged a glance with his son before answering. "To bring you and the children to Boston, of course. Thomas's share of the family business awaits them. They'll be raised with every advantage, the finest schools, proper society, their rightful inheritance." "And me?" Hannah asked quietly. "You would be provided for, naturally. A comfortable home, servants, an appropriate allowance. In exchange for what?" Edward looked momentarily taken aback. "I don't understand." "I believe you do," Hannah said, finding strength in her maternal instinct. "You want to control their upbringing, make them proper Baileys according to your standards." "Is that so terrible?" Richard interjected. "To want the best for one's family, the best according to whom?" Hannah countered. "These children are all I have left of Thomas. I won't surrender them to become pawns in your business empire." Edward's expression hardened. "You misunderstand me, Mrs. Bailey. I'm not asking. As their closest male relative, I have legal rights regarding their welfare, should I choose to petition the courts." "Are you threatening to take my children?" Hannah's voice rose, causing James to stir fretfully in her arms. "I'm offering you a comfortable life," Edward replied coldly. "But make no mistake, those children are Baileys and they belong with their family." Abigail, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "I think you should leave, Mr. Bailey. Hannah has been through enough without your bullying." Edward regarded her with disdain. "This doesn't concern you, madam. It concerns me when you threaten a woman in my home," Abigail retorted. "Hannah and her children are under my protection." "The protection of a spinster farmer," Richard scoffed. Against the resources of the Bailey family, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted the tense standoff. Moments later, Wade Callahan's imposing figure filled the doorway, his deputy marshal's badge gleaming on his chest. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his gaze taking in the scene with professional assessment before settling on Hannah's distressed face. "Deputy Marshal Wade Callahan," Abigail introduced, relief evident in her voice. "My brother. And these gentlemen are Edward and Richard Bailey, Thomas's father and brother." Wade removed his hat, but his stance remained vigilant. "Gentlemen, what brings you to my sister's home?" "Family business," Edward replied stiffly. "We've come to make arrangements for my son's widow and children." "Arrangements that Hannah doesn't appear to welcome," Wade observed, moving to stand beside her. His proximity provided a comfort that Hannah felt down to her bones. Edward's eyes narrowed as he noted the protective gesture. "Mrs. Bailey and her children belong in Boston, with their family and social equals. I'm prepared to provide generously for them, and if she chooses to remain here." Wade asked mildly, though Hannah could sense the steel beneath his calm exterior. "That would be unfortunate," Edward replied. "As I was explaining before you arrived, I have legal recourse should Mrs. Bailey prove difficult." Wade's expression hardened. "Are you threatening to separate a mother from her newborn children, Mr. Bailey?" "I'm stating facts," Edward said. "The courts typically favor the interests of wealthy relatives over those of impoverished widows with no means of support." "Hannah isn't without support," Wade countered. "And any attempt to remove those children against their mothers would constitute kidnapping in this territory, a crime I would personally investigate with extreme prejudice." The air in the room crackled with tension. Edward Bailey was clearly unaccustomed to opposition, but he was also shrewd enough to recognize the determination in the Marshal's stance. "We'll be staying at the Helena Grand Hotel for the week," he finally said, reaching for his hat. "I suggest you reconsider my offer, Mrs. Bailey. For the children's sake." His gaze softened slightly as it fell on the infants. "They deserve their birthright." After the Baileys departed, Hannah sank into a chair, trembling. "They'll take them," she whispered. "They have money, influence." Wade knelt before her, taking her free hand in his. "They won't take your children, Hannah, I promise you that." "You don't know Edward Bailey," Hannah said, tears threatening. "Thomas said his father never lost a fight in business or in court." "He's never faced me," Wade replied with quiet confidence, "or the law of the Montana Territory." Abigail brought tea laced with brandy, and gradually Hannah's trembling subsided. As the twins woke for their evening feeding, Wade paced the kitchen, deep in thought. "There's one sure way to protect Hannah and the children," he finally said to his sister. Abigail nodded as if she'd already reached the same conclusion. "I was thinking the same." "What way?" Hannah asked, looking between them. Wade turned to her, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Marriage," he said simply. "As your husband, I would have legal standing equal to or greater than Edward Bailey regarding the children." He couldn't challenge it without significant difficulty. Hannah stared at him, speechless. "It would be a marriage of convenience, of course," Wade continued hurriedly, misinterpreting her silence. "To protect you and the twins, you'd have the full protection of my name and position, and Bailey would have to go through me to get to the children." "Wade," Abigail interrupted gently. "Perhaps Hannah needs time to consider such a proposal." Hannah found her voice at last. "You would marry me, take on a widow with 2 infants just to protect us from Edward Bailey?" Wade's blue eyes held her steadily. "I would, but not just because of Bailey." He took a deep breath. "I've grown to care for you, Hannah, and for James and Elizabeth, more than I thought possible in such a short time." "But marriage," Hannah whispered, "that's a lifetime commitment." "I'm aware," Wade said softly, "and I'm offering it freely." Hannah looked down at her children, then back at the man standing before her, this honorable, gentle-hearted man who had already carried so much of her burden without complaint. "I need time to think," she finally said. Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, I'll call on you tomorrow." He retrieved his hat. "Lock the doors tonight, Abby. I'll have Deputy Parker ride by periodically to check on things." After he'd gone, Abigail sat beside Hannah on the settee. "My brother is many things," she said quietly, "but impulsive isn't one of them. If he's offering marriage, his feelings run deep." "How can they?" Hannah wondered aloud. "He barely knows me." "He knows enough," Abigail replied, "and sometimes the heart recognizes its match more quickly than the mind can comprehend." She patted Hannah's hand. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow will bring clarity." But clarity proved elusive as Hannah lay awake that night, her mind churning with conflicted thoughts. Marriage to Wade would solve her most pressing problem, Edward Bailey's threat to take her children. It would provide security, respectability, and the protection of a man she already admired greatly. Yet the thought of entering another marriage so soon after losing Thomas felt somehow disloyal, even if it was primarily for protection. And what of Wade? He deserved a wife who came to him unencumbered, free to love him without the shadows of grief and fear that still haunted her. Dawn found Hannah sitting by the window, watching the sunrise paint the fields gold. The twins slept peacefully, unaware of the turmoil surrounding their future. As she gazed at their innocent faces, Hannah knew she would do anything to protect them, even marry a man she wasn't certain she loved, though her feelings for Wade Callahan grew stronger with each encounter. The decision crystallized within her heart as the first rays of sunlight touched her face. She would accept Wade's proposal, but with conditions that protected his future as well as her own. It was the only way forward that allowed her to retain both her children and her dignity. Wade arrived mid-morning, his usually confident demeanor replaced by an uncharacteristic nervousness. He removed his hat as he entered the parlor where Hannah waited, the twins napping in their cradle nearby. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Hannah said after they had exchanged greetings. "And I've been worrying I overstepped," Wade admitted, settling into the chair across from her. "Abigail suggested I might have been too forward." A small smile touched Hannah's lips. "Your sister is protective of both of us, it seems." "She always has been wiser than me," Wade agreed. "Hannah, if you'd prefer to find another solution, I accept your proposal," Hannah interrupted gently. "But with conditions." Wade's expression shifted from resignation to cautious hope. "Name them." "First, this will be a true marriage in all ways, not merely a legal arrangement. I won't enter into a union based on deception." Wade's eyebrows rose slightly. "I hadn't expected." "Second," Hannah continued, "you must understand that while I care for you deeply, I'm still grieving Thomas. My heart needs time to heal completely." Wade nodded solemnly. "Of course." "Third, the children will carry your name, but they must know about their father when they're old enough to understand." "I would insist on it," Wade said. "Thomas's memory should be honored." Hannah took a deep breath. "Finally, if at any time you regret this decision, I will release you from our marriage without bitterness. I won't have you resent me or the children for trapping you." Wade rose from his chair and knelt before Hannah, taking her hands in his. "I accept your conditions, but I have one of my own." His blue eyes held hers with unwavering sincerity. "Never doubt that this marriage is my choice made freely and with a full heart. I may not have planned to become a husband and father in this way, but I consider it a blessing, not a burden." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes at the simple truth in his words. Wade reached up to brush one away as it spilled onto her cheek. "Is that a yes, Hannah Bailey?" he asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. "It is." Wade's smile transformed his face, years of care seemingly lifted away. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her lips there first. It was brief but full of promise, and when he pulled back, Hannah felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with embarrassment. "We should speak with the Reverend today," Wade said, rising to his feet. "The sooner we're married, the sooner Edward Bailey's threats become meaningless." Hannah agreed, and by that afternoon, arrangements had been made for a small ceremony 2 days hence. Judge Wilson, a friend of Wade's, had agreed to expedite the marriage license given the circumstances, and Reverend Thompson would perform the ceremony at the small church in town. Word traveled quickly in the close-knit community. By evening, neighbors were arriving with gifts and well-wishes, practical items for the newly formed family, and promises of help with the upcoming harvest. The genuine warmth of their acceptance moved Hannah deeply. These people barely knew her, yet they welcomed her as one of their own simply because Wade had chosen her. The day before the wedding, Edward Bailey returned, this time alone. Hannah received him in Abigail's parlor, Wade standing supportively at her side. "I've learned of your impending marriage," Edward said without preamble. "A convenient arrangement, I must say." "There's nothing convenient about it," Wade replied evenly. "I love Hannah and her children. Our marriage is based on that love, nothing more." Edward's gaze shifted between them, assessing. "Is this true?" he asked Hannah directly. Hannah lifted her chin. "It is. Wade has been my strength since Thomas died. I couldn't ask for a better father for my children." Something shifted in Edward's expression, a subtle softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his rigid posture. "Thomas was my firstborn," he said quietly. His decision to leave Boston broke his mother's heart. "When we received word of his death, I vowed his children would not grow up without the Bailey name and heritage." "They won't," Hannah assured him. "They'll know about their father, his family, and their heritage, but they'll be raised here with both their families." Edward was silent for a long moment. "I underestimated you, Mrs. Bailey," he finally said. "Thomas chose better than I gave him credit for." He reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "This contains documents establishing trust funds for both children, accessible when they reach adulthood. Additionally, there is a draft for $5,000, your widow's portion of Thomas's inheritance." Hannah gasped at the sum, more money than she had ever imagined possessing. "Mr. Bailey, I can't." "You can and you will," Edward interrupted firmly. "Not for yourself if your pride forbids it, but for Thomas's children, their birthright." Wade placed a supportive hand on Hannah's shoulder. "The children will be well provided for, Mr. Bailey. You have my word on that." Edward nodded, then hesitated. "I would like to see them grow." Perhaps regular correspondence and occasional visits, the simple request, made with such uncharacteristic uncertainty, revealed the grieving father beneath the businessman's exterior. Hannah felt a surge of compassion. "Of course," she said softly. "They should know their grandfather." Relief washed over Edward's features. "Thank you." He extended his hand to Wade. "Take care of them, Marshal Callahan." Wade shook the offered hand. "With my life, sir." After Edward Bailey's departure, Hannah sank into a chair, emotionally drained. "I never expected him to relent," she admitted. Wade knelt beside her. "He's a father who lost his son. Beneath all that Boston propriety, he's grieving too." He took her hands in his. "Are you still certain about tomorrow? Now that Bailey isn't a threat, you don't need to marry me for protection." Hannah squeezed his hands. "I'm not marrying you for protection, Wade. Not anymore." The simple church filled with townsfolk the following afternoon. Hannah wore a dress of deep blue silk, a gift from Abigail, who had been saving the fabric for a special occasion. The twins, dressed in christening gowns Abigail had hastily sewn, were held by a neighbor during the brief ceremony. Wade stood tall in a black suit, his badge polished and pinned to his lapel, his eyes never leaving Hannah's face as they spoke their vows. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Wade's kiss was tender but held a promise of deeper passion to come. The small reception at Abigail's farmhouse stretched into evening, neighbors bringing food and music, celebrating not just a wedding but the formation of a family. As twilight fell, Wade found Hannah on the porch, watching the first stars appear. "No regrets?" he asked softly, standing beside her. Hannah looked up at her new husband, this man who had so unexpectedly become her rock in the storm of life. "None," she replied truthfully. "Though I am nervous about tonight." A flush colored Wade's cheeks. "We can wait, Hannah. I meant what I said about giving you time." Hannah reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I don't want to wait," she whispered. "I want to be a true wife to you, Wade." The look in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. "Then let's say our goodnights," he suggested, his voice husky. "I believe our guests have celebrated enough for one evening." Later, in the privacy of the room that was now theirs in Abigail's house, Wade proved himself as gentle and considerate a lover as he was a man. His touches were reverent, his patience endless as Hannah rediscovered passion in his arms. When they finally came together as husband and wife, the last shadows of doubt melted away, replaced by a certainty that this marriage, however hastily arranged, was exactly where she was meant to be. "I love you," Wade whispered against her hair as they lay entwined afterward. "I think I have since I found you on that dusty road." Hannah pressed closer to him, her heart full. "And I love you," she replied, the words no longer frightening to speak aloud, "for carrying all of us when we needed it most." The first year of their marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Wade continued his work as a marshal, though he arranged his duties to keep him closer to home. Hannah divided her time between caring for the twins and helping Abigail with the farm and weaving business, which flourished under their combined efforts. James and Elizabeth grew from helpless infants to curious, crawling explorers who delighted in discovering the world around them. Elizabeth, the more adventurous of the two, took her first steps at 10 months, toddling determinedly toward Wade when he returned from a 3-day absence. James, more thoughtful and observant, waited until he was 11 months before walking, but once he started, he rarely stopped. As summer approached again, bringing with it the twins' first birthday, Hannah discovered she was expecting another child, Wade's child. The news filled them both with joy and a renewed sense of their family's completeness. Edward Bailey kept his word, sending letters and gifts for the children's birthdays and Christmas. In his correspondence, Hannah detected a gradual softening, a genuine interest in his grandchildren's lives that went beyond obligation. He even extended an invitation for the family to visit Boston when the children were older, an invitation Wade suggested they might accept. It would be good for them to know both sides of their heritage, he reasoned. The refinement of Boston and the freedom of Montana. Hannah agreed, though the thought of facing Boston society as a former mining widow turned marshal's wife was daunting. But that was a concern for another day, years in the future. On a warm autumn evening, as the twins slept soundly and the household settled into nighttime quiet, Hannah and Wade sat on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the stars emerge. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me on that road?" Hannah asked softly. Wade's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Providence put me there for a reason," he said simply. "Just as it brought Thomas into your life when it did, and took him when it did, though the pain of that must have seemed unbearable." Hannah placed a hand on her growing belly, feeling the new life within. "I used to question why Thomas had to die, why I was left alone with 2 babies on the way. Now I see it was leading me here to you." Wade pressed a kiss to her temple. "Not a day passes that I don't grieve for Thomas's loss, even as I'm grateful for the family he left behind, the family that became mine." He placed his hand over hers on her belly. "Our family now, our family," Hannah echoed, the words filling her with contentment. As darkness deepened around them, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from desperate widow to beloved wife, from uncertainty to security, from heartbreak to healing. Wade had kept his promise made that day on the dusty road. He had carried her burdens as if they were his own, transforming them from weights into blessings. The twins were thriving, another child was on the way, and Hannah's heart, once so heavy with grief, now overflowed with love for the man beside her. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, just as they had from the moment Wade Callahan had ridden into her life and offered to carry all that she couldn't bear alone. As if reading her thoughts, Wade turned to her in the darkness. "I was thinking about building us our own place," he said quietly. "Not far from here, Abigail has offered us the parcel to the east, near the creek. Big enough for a proper house, room for the children to run, maybe some horses." "Your own ranch?" Hannah asked, smiling at the thought. It was a dream Wade had mentioned before. "Our own ranch," he corrected. "A legacy for James and Elizabeth and this little one." He patted her belly gently. "What do you think?" Hannah considered the idea of a home truly their own, a place built with love from the foundation up, large enough for their growing family, close enough to Abigail that she remained part of their daily lives. "I think it sounds perfect," she said, leaning up to kiss him softly. Wade's answering smile held all the promise of their future together. "Then that's what we'll do," he said simply. "Build a home, raise our children, live the life we've been given. Together," Hannah added. "Always together," Wade agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of endless tomorrows, all as bright as the stars overhead. By the following spring, construction had begun on their new home. Wade hired the best builders in the territory, and Hannah spent hours poring over plans, ensuring every detail would suit their family's needs. The house would be modest by Eastern standards, but spacious by Western ones. 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen and dining area, a study for Wade, and wide porches wrapping around the structure. Hannah gave birth to their daughter, Hope Abigail Callahan, on a crisp April morning with Wade pacing nervously outside the bedroom door and the twins being entertained by their doting aunt. Unlike the twins' dramatic arrival, Hope's birth was straightforward, and Hannah recovered quickly, eager to resume overseeing the construction of their home. Edward Bailey made good on his promise to visit, arriving that summer with trunks of gifts and a genuine desire to know his grandchildren. Though initially stiff and formal, he melted under the charm of 2-year-old Elizabeth, who climbed fearlessly into his lap and demanded stories. James, more reserved like his grandfather, won the older man's heart by solemnly presenting him with a perfectly round stone found by the creek, a treasure the boy had been saving for someone special. By autumn, their new house was complete, and the family moved in with as much ceremony as the small community could muster. Neighbors brought food and furniture, helping to transform the newly built structure into a home filled with warmth and laughter. On their first night there, after the children were asleep in their new rooms, Wade led Hannah onto the porch where 2 rocking chairs waited side by side, facing the mountains. "This is what I imagined," he said softly, "when I first thought of building this place. You and me watching the sunset, our children sleeping safely inside." Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder, content beyond words. "It's more than I ever dared to dream," she admitted. "After Thomas died, I thought my life was over. Now I see it was just beginning." Wade took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. "I used to ride these trails alone, doing my duty but never feeling like I had a real purpose beyond the badge. Finding you changed everything. For better or worse," Hannah teased gently, "for better. Always for better." Wade's blue eyes, soft in the fading light, held hers. "I would do it all again, find you on that road, deliver those babies, face down Edward Bailey, all of it just to end up right here, right now, with you." As darkness settled around them and the first stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. The path that had led her here had been marked by both sorrow and joy, loss and discovery, endings and beginnings. Wade had promised to carry her burdens that day on the dusty road, but what he'd given her was far more precious, not just support in her darkest hour, but a love that had healed her broken heart and built a new life from the fragments of the old. Together they had created something beautiful and enduring, a family bound not just by blood and circumstance, but by choice and commitment, and a love that grew stronger with each passing day. As they sat in peaceful silence, watching over the land that was now their home, Hannah offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together, for the twins who had drawn Wade's compassion, for the heavy heart that had recognized his strength, and for the cowboy who had changed everything with 7 simple words: "Let me carry all of it." And he had, every day since.